there's no charges being imposed for industrial type, and these are the calculated charges existing for land and short. You can see it's actually area reduction. Now, one thing I'll just mention, with all of these bylaws, most of the municipalities are going to go through over the next 2 years having to update the bylaws just as you've done. Okay? Normally, what's happened is these bylaws have a 5-year useful life. 2009, the 1997 Act said you had to have the bylaw no later than August 31st, 1999. So you got 1999, 2004, 2009, 2013, 14. So we're right in that era right now where everybody's starting to do these calculations. I'm doing Kingsville's public meeting on Monday night. I've just initiated a process with North Middlesex to review their charges. Chatham-Kent is just about to start, so there's a number of them that'll be going through this process very soon. Yes, Petrolia is looking at it right.
Gary, just a quick question. We don't have a lot of industrial land and shores. What we do have is minimal compared to probably other areas around us, but I'm just saying, does it look silly for us to be the highest development charge cost for land we don't have on the books when all these neighbors beside us are saying, come on down? Why do we even have it?
Well, there's a number of different things that a business considers. You know, they consider development charge are one component. They consider what the land costs are that they're purchasing, but they also consider really the big driver is how much are property taxes. Because property taxes to me are probably a bigger consideration than the cost of land development. Most people, you say, well, gee, you would think of it that way, but we made a decision. We at one time, many years ago, we lived in Toronto. Our business was in Toronto, and we moved out, and we were going to move into, we had one property that was we had 2 properties that were virtually the same. Every element, the location was only a couple of kilometers, but on one side was in Toronto, and the other side was in Mississauga. Toronto was 80% higher on the operating cost than Mississauga. Well, it was a no-brainer. Same cost and everything, but in perpetuity, we would be paying 80% more property taxes. And I was in Toronto, and we ended up going to Mississauga. I've gone through with negotiating with Toyota, negotiating with Stelco and Dofasco, negotiating with a lot of the developments. When they're going through, all costs are factored, but probably the 3 key decisions for industrial is labor, taxes, and transportation, because all 3 of those cost them money. They haven't got the labor, they have to import it. They haven't got the transportation. It takes them longer to get vehicles out in the end. That costs them money on the operating side, and the property taxes, as I say, is a perpetuity. If you want, that basically concludes, let's just do it this way. That pretty well, that pretty well concludes my presentation, and then we go back and talk about everything's up for discussion.
You want to go to the commercial side then? Accepting what Councillor Bounce just said about industrial, which I think we fully realize we're not an industrial giant here, unless they're going to speak Mandarin, bring coal over the ground or something. We're not going to do that. But this is the one that makes more sense in terms of if we're going to affect any change, and it's an EDC type of thing. The fact of the matter is, we have high residential component, we have a low commercial component, we have almost non-existent industrial component. It's a very unusual mix, as you're well aware of. So my thought is, in terms of we've thrown some ideas at you in terms of mitigating the core areas, et cetera, but it doesn't mitigate too far. But what I'm wondering about is, when you say that, for example, there's all kinds of people are looking at theirs because they all have to do it like we're doing. We have to do it by law, And then all the years I've been involved in this, I've heard from the petroleums of this world, well, we don't want it, right? Well, I'm assuming that Mr. McCharles is going to be sitting and looking at a very interesting development charges bylaw that you'll be proposing to him because they don't have it. Because one of the things we have done, I think, since amalgamation particularly, is we've tried to develop one that was in sync with the figures that you provide or that whatever. So I've always been quite proud of that fact. But this is the one that drives me nuts. If in fact we want to do an EDC type of thing, and accepting that it's such a small part of the pie, should we be doing more? Because say for example, just look on there quickly, close to us, Saugeen Shores we're compared to a lot. Many times we've heard about Saugeen Shores up the road from us, have a lot of similarities and stuff, and they're sitting at, you know, what, 2.5, and we're up at, proposed at almost 7. And I'm thinking, well, our commercial segment is very important to our economy, but it's also important in another sense. If these cores are going to be developed and as we depopulate in a rural sense, right, those commercial people need to be encouraged, right? But they also need to be encouraged to, I think as the EDC people said, retention and that type of thing. Is it a tool in that sense, Gary? For an example, like, do you take that hit because it's a certain percentage and bring it down to a more encouraging, because we can't do it through taxes, as you said. The regime is no different with commercial people than it is with industrial. People are going to make business decisions based on long-term planning. If they don't, they shouldn't be in business probably. I don't speak as a businessman, I'm a public employee, so obviously I have no brains about these things. But the fact of the matter is that are those ones artificial in a sense? You'd know more about that than we. Are they artificial in the sense that somebody like you has come in and said this is what it should be, but they have made decisions? I'm talking only on commercial. We talk about industrial until we're blue in the face. Why do we talk about industrial so much? Like, duh. This is the one that counts.
So commercial.
This is the one that counts.
Commercial and institutional generally follow the populations, and that's what it amounts to. So they normally, it's, you know, within the, we've got a certain probably market area. For a pizzeria, you're probably only within a certain area, you know, different types of services, you'll have a different boundary and stuff like that. Industrials have very wide boundaries. So normally it's not as much of a driver. You know, if you have a higher charge or lower charge, obviously everybody will argue with you because nobody likes to pay anything. So
No, I appreciate
I'll stand corrected, I'm sure, during the public section of this, but generally, the commercial industrial isn't influenced as much by these charges. Now, that being said, you know, it's something
In
that
small town Ontario or just everywhere?
right across Ontario.
But the atrophication of our small towns is completely different than going to Markham or going to Mississauga.
I understand
You know, and that has other formulas that are attached to it. A depopulation versus an immigration growth, right?
Well, you can flip it around another way. If in smaller towns, your ability for you to have leakage where they're going to go somewhere else.
That's right.
If you need to get a pizza, you're not going to drive to London or to Sarnia. You know,
We've got a hardware store.
Yeah.
I mean, we will understand that. All I'm asking you is this a tool? Are you advising others that this is a tool for retention and rejuvenation? Because if in fact we're talking about our core and 25% isn't enough, maybe we should be at 50% or 75% or something. Because the encouragement of it, I think, is one of the major issues we have. Because if you don't have small businesses in small towns, then what you're going to have is dormitories, right?
Well,
That's what you have. You have
from our
dormitories.
discussions, you had our observations or you had perspectives that you wanted to test. And I think that what you provided here, whether it's for a short, medium, long-term period, you suggested making reductions. I'm not going to advise you not to do or whatever. I mean, you are always
Isn't what I was
closest.
asking you.
You're always closest. My basic opinion was what I gave you. Generally,
Pay the full, sure.
they fought. Is the level of the charge so astronomical that it would inhibit anybody from development? From my perspective, I don't think it is. But you can also do other things. If you can negotiate, and it's there with the Act, allow them to pay 1/10 of it over 10 years. So you can phase it in, and you can do a delayed payment agreement. We can gonna supply you with that. So there's different mechanisms you